Hello everybody and welcome back to Denmark 101. Today I want to reference Harvard's The Atlas of Economic Complexity. Now I want to do that because this provides a really cool way to look at the Danish export economy circa 2013. Unfortunately, that's the latest period with relevant information, but it tells so much about the Danish economy and where the Danish economy has come from, where it's going, and a little bit about Danish culture. So, because this involves a whole bunch of numbers, I need to cheat a little bit. The largest export for Denmark, 20% of the economy, is classified as machinery and electrical. Now, this makes perfect sense when you think what is one of the things that Denmark is the most famous for, and that is renewable energy. It is windmills. And what are windmills? They are large machines, right? But then also, as you dive into it a little bit more and you dive into some of the big Danish companies that are out there, Gunfoss and some of these others, that are based in Jutland, in the mainland, and you don't hear about that much. They're not as flashy perhaps as Lego or Carlsberg, right? But these are the backbone of old school Danish industry, and that's a full 20% of the economy, and it's pretty cool when you think about, like, okay, how that is continuing to grow, where there are opportunities there for these wonderful exports, and then how that also complements Denmark's dedication to education. Creating engineers, creating skilled workers that then can facilitate the construct and innovation of this machinery. Even though sometimes it's a pump, which can be also very, very complicated, or is it a very complex windmill or advanced electronic part? The next biggest, at 18%, chemicals and allied industries. So that sounds fairly ominous, but it actually ends up being pretty cool because that is Novo Nordisk, that is Lundbeck, those are the biotech, biologics companies that are specializing in diabetes drugs, in enzymes for your food, for all of these different very highly specialized, highly scientific areas. And there's of course some other chemical compositions in there, but those are the two areas that end up being very kind of very essential and making up a huge chunk of the Danish economy. Now, next up is animal and animal products. That's a full 12%. Now, milk and pork are kind of two things that go hand in hand with Denmark and Danes and Danish cuisine and Danish lifestyle, and so that is in no small part because there is this long-standing rich farming tradition within Denmark, and as pork farmers and dairy farmers and just farmers in general. And so within that long-standing tradition, of course, it makes sense that a huge chunk of their exports would come from pork and dairy and cheese, and also beef. Surprisingly, given that dairy is such a big component of it, you don't have as large beef exports as perhaps you would assume, because that is very much trumped by pork. But I suppose you're using one for your milk and your cheese, good old milk cows on grazing on these beautiful Danish rolling fields and hills, and then pork for kind of everything else. And so that is the iconic part of the Danish of the Danish palate, but also what they're exporting. The next up is foodstuffs, which is 7%. But surprisingly, only, I think, about 0.5% is beer. Which, when you think Copenhagen, Carlsberg, everything else, that perhaps that would be quite higher. But then again, 0.5% of a country's entire exports being beer, that's still pretty reasonable. And that's actually just, when I was looking into it, that's just beer. When you factor in the fact that there's, of course, hops and everything else going with it, I imagine that's quite a bit more foodstuffs. Here as well, some of the enzymes and things that you have great traditional historic Danish companies producing, they also kind of fall within this category. The other last kind of really, really big one is mineral products. Now, mineral products, that is oil and natural gas. And even though when you talk to Danes, they will very quickly tell you about the time when Norway was getting its independence, they were creating deals and they were negotiating everything, how the Norwegians got the Danish representative very drunk and he made a very bad deal. And that is how the Norwegians, of course, ended up with all of the oil rights in the North Sea and in these various other areas, which has made Norway an incredibly rich country. Well, it turns out, and of course, Denmark is famous for Maersk, which is an incredible shipping company, one of the largest, if not the largest in the world, and has drilling, oil transport, shipping, all of these different things, logistics. But it turns out that Denmark actually does have a good chunk of oil, natural gas, access to that. Not as big as they would like, but it is there, and at at roughly 11% combined with other minerals and other things, that's still quite healthy. You also have 6%, which is metals, and this is very much about somewhat about mining. There are a lot of mineral mines and things along those lines, but it's also about processing, and they do a lot of ore processing, ore treatment, and that side of it, really crafting it into and refining it, and then exporting the completed product from there. That's pretty much it for the big sections. You have another 3% for transportation. You have vegetable products, which is about 3%, which, the Danish climate is great for growing certain things, really good for grass or rapeseed crops, things along those lines. It's perhaps because of the seasonality, and even though it's very moderate, mild in comparison to a lot of other areas, it's still perhaps not as temperate as parts of Germany or France. Not too many vineyards, places like that. So it's a little bit harder to grow. And then plastics and rubbers, and miscellaneous. These are categories where you get some other great companies that usually fall in there. Coloplast, which is making colostomy bags and a lot of medical devices. They kind of sometimes fall within these categories. Textiles, another 3%. So all that Danish fashion that gets exported, and also some woodworking tools. I think that's kind of that's 2%. And so that's all those your sweet Danish designer chairs and Danish pipes. So it's quite interesting what that says, because that also in many ways mirrors what the internal economy looks a lot like. And moving forward, that tells you a lot about what the future of Denmark is going to look like as Denmark has to decide how it's going to change. Is it going to be a logistics country? I mean, you're looking at a country that has a very high cost of living, that has a lot of infrastructure in place to support people, that has a high functional minimum wage, even though there is no official minimum wage. So as Denmark moves forward, what is Denmark going to become, and what is Denmark going to focus on when it comes to exports? Is it going to double down on biotech and biochemical and innovation that way, or will it be high tech and figuring out ways to export that? Things like hearing aids or advanced devices and like bows and music systems, those are all within that kind of ecosystem. Or do they double down on kind of the more traditional side of it? I mean, we're going to want butter for a long time. Are we going to continue to kind of will that be a cornerstone of the Danish economy moving forward? So I will post a comment, a description with a link to this tool. It's super exciting, super fun to play with. Let me know what you think, what your favorite parts of the Danish economy are, what you find the most surprising about the Danish economy, because we, regardless of if you're Dane or if you're a foreigner, we always have these preconceptions. And again, this was all about exports using figures from 2013, so it'll be fun to see when the latest data comes out, what that says and how the economy and exports are evolving over time. And maybe in the future I will do another one about the Danish internal economy or imports. Anyway, as always, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for sharing, liking, subscribing, all of it. I absolutely love it. Love your feedback, love your comments. And if you would like to see something covered in Denmark 101, of course, post it in a comment. I would love to have a think on it and offer my take. Thank you.